Yellowstone National Park is a national park located primarily in the U.S. state of Wyoming, although it also extends into Montana and Idaho. It was established by the U.S. Congress and signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant on March 1, 1872. Yellowstone, the first national park in the U.S., and widely held to be the first national park in the world, is known for its wildlife and its many geothermal features, especially Old Faithful geyser, one of the most popular features in the park. It has many types of ecosystems, but the subalpine forest is the most abundant. It is part of the south-central Rockies forests ecoregion. Native Americans have lived in the Yellowstone region for at least 11,000 years. Aside from visits by mountain men during the early to mid-19th century, organized exploration did not begin until the late 1860s. Management of the park originally fell under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of the Interior. However, the U.S. Army was subsequently commissioned to oversee management of Yellowstone for a 30-year period between 1886 and 1916. In 1917, administration of the park was transferred to the National Park Service, which had been created the previous year. Hundreds of structures have been built and are protected for their architectural and historical significance, and researchers have examined more than 1,000 archaeological sites. Yellowstone National Park spans an area of 3,468.4 square miles, comprising lakes, canyons, rivers and mountain ranges. Yellowstone Lake is one of the largest high-elevation lakes in North America and is centered over the Yellowstone caldera, the largest supervolcano on the continent. The caldera is considered an active volcano. It has erupted with tremendous force several times in the last 2 million years. Half of the world's geothermal features are in Yellowstone, fueled by this ongoing volcanism. Lava flows and rocks from volcanic eruptions cover most of the land area of Yellowstone. The park is the centerpiece of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the largest remaining nearly intact ecosystem in the Earth's northern temperate zone. Hundreds of species of mammals, birds, fish and reptiles have been documented, including several that are either endangered or threatened. The vast forests and grasslands also include unique species of plants. Yellowstone Park is the largest and most famous megafauna location in the continental United States. Grizzly bears, wolves, and free-ranging herds of bison and elk live in the park. The Yellowstone Park bison herd is the oldest and largest public bison herd in the United States. Forest fires occur in the park each year. In the large forest fires of 1988, nearly one-third of the park was burned. Yellowstone has numerous recreational opportunities, including hiking, camping, boating, fishing and sightseeing. Paved roads provide close access to the major geothermal areas as well as some of the lakes and waterfalls. During the winter, visitors often access the park by way of guided tours that use either snow coaches or snowmobiles. History. The park is at the headwaters of the Yellowstone River, from which it takes its historical name. Near the end of the 18th century, French trappers named the river Roche Journa, which is probably a translation of the Hidatsa name Meti-Dazi. Later, American trappers rendered the French name in English as Yellowstone, although it is commonly believed that the river was named for the yellow rocks seen in the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. The Native American name source is unclear. The human history of the park begins at least 11,000 years ago when Native Americans began to hunt and fish in the region. During the construction of the post office in Gardner, Montana, Montana in the 1950s. An obsidian projectile point of Clovis origin was found that dated from approximately 11,000 years ago. These Paleo-Indians of the Clovis culture used the significant amounts of obsidian found in the park to make cutting tools and weapons. Arrowheads made of Yellowstone obsidian have been found as far away as the Mississippi Valley, indicating that a regular obsidian trade existed between local tribes and tribes farther east. By the time white explorers first entered the region during the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1805, they encountered the Nez Perce, Crow, and Shoshone tribes. While passing through present-day Montana, the expedition members heard of the Yellowstone region to the south, but they did not investigate it. In 1806, John Coulter, a member of the Lewis and Clark expedition, left to join a group of fur trappers. After splitting up with the other trappers in 1807, Coulter passed through portion of what later became the park. During the winter of 1807 to 1808, he observed at least one geothermal area in the northeastern section of the park, near Tower Fall. After surviving wounds he suffered in a battle with members of the Crow and Blackfoot tribes in 1809, Coulter described a place of fire and brimstone that most people dismissed as delirium. The supposedly imaginary place was nicknamed Coulter's Hell. Over the next 40 years, numerous reports from mountain men and trappers told of boiling mud, steaming rivers, and petrified trees. Yet most of these reports were believed at the time to be myth. After an 1856 exploration, mountain man Jim Bridger reported observing boiling springs, spouting water, and a mountain of glass and yellow rock. These reports were largely ignored because Bridger was a known spinner of yarns. In 1859, a U.S. Army surveyor named Captain William F. Reynolds embarked on a 2-year survey of the northern Rockies. After wintering in Wyoming in May 1860, Reynolds and his party, which included naturalist Ferdinand van der Veer Hayden and guide Jim Bridger, attempted to cross the Continental Divide over to Ocean Plateau from the Wind River drainage in northwest Wyoming. Heavy spring snows prevented the passage, but had they been able to traverse the divide, the party would have been the first organized survey to enter the Yellowstone region. The American Civil War hampered further organized explorations until the late 1860s. The first detailed expedition to the Yellowstone area was the Cook-Folsom-Peterson expedition of 1869, which consisted of 3 privately funded explorers. The Folsom Party followed the Yellowstone River to Yellowstone Lake. The members of the Folsom Party kept a journal, and based on the information it reported, a party of Montana residents organized the Washburn-Langford Doane expedition in 1870. It was headed by the Surveyor General of Montana Henry Washburn, and included Nathaniel P. Langford and a U.S. Army detachment commanded by Lt. Gustavus Doane. The expedition spent about a month exploring the region, collecting specimens and naming sites of interest. A Montana writer and lawyer named Cornelius Hedges, who had been a member of the Washburn expedition, proposed that the region should be set aside and protected as a national park. He wrote detailed articles about his observations for the Helena Herald newspaper between 1870 and 1871. Hedges essentially restated comments made in October 1865 by acting Montana Territorial Governor Thomas Francis Mather, who had previously commented that the region should be protected. Others made similar suggestions. In an 1871 letter from J. Cook to Ferdinand V. Hayden, Cook read that his friend, Congressman William D. Kelly, had also suggested Congress pass a bill reserving the Great Weiser Basin as a public park forever. park creation in 1871, 11 years after his failed first effort, Ferdinand V Hayden was finally able to explore the region. With government sponsorship, he returned to the region with a second, larger expedition, the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871. He compiled a comprehensive report, including large-format photographs by William Henry Jackson and paintings by Thomas Moran. The report helped to convince the U.S. Congress to withdraw this region from public auction. On March 1, 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed the Act of Dedication law that created Yellowstone National Park. Hayden, while not the only person to have thought of creating a park in the region, was its first and most enthusiastic advocate. He believed in setting aside the area as a pleasure ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people, and warned that there were those who would come and make merchandise of these beautiful specimens, worrying the area could face the same fate as Niagara Falls. He concluded the site should be as free as the air or water. Quote, in his report to the Committee on Public Lands, he concluded that if the bill failed to become law, the vandals who are now waiting to enter into this wonderland will in a single season despoil, beyond recovery, these remarkable curiosities, which have required all the cunning skill of nature thousands of years to prepare. Hayden and his 1871 party recognized Yellowstone as a priceless treasure that would become rarer with time. He wished for others to see and experience it as well. Eventually the railroads and, some time after that, the automobile would make that possible. The park was not set aside strictly for ecological purposes, however. The designation, pleasure ground, was not an invitation to create an amusement park. Hayden imagined something akin to the scenic resorts and baths in England, Germany, and Switzerland. The Act of Dedication, an act to set apart of certain tract of land lying near the headwaters of the Yellowstone River as a public park, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the tract of land in the territories of Montana and Wyoming is hereby reserved and withdrawn from settlement, occupancy, or sale under the laws of the United States, and dedicated and set apart as a public park, a pleasuring ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people and all persons who shall locate, or settle upon, or occupy the same or any part thereof, except as hereinafter provided, shall be considered trespasses and removed therefrom. Approved March 1, 1872. Signed by James G. Blaine, Speaker of the House; Schuyler Colfax, Vice President of the United States and President of the Senate; Ulysses S. Grant, President of the United States. There was considerable local opposition to the Yellowstone National Park during its early years. Some of the locals feared that the regional economy would be unable to thrive if there remained strict federal prohibitions against resource development or settlement within park boundaries, and local entrepreneurs advocated reducing the size of the park so that mining, hunting, and logging activities could be developed. To this end, numerous bills were introduced into Congress by Montana representatives who sought to remove the federal land use restrictions. After the park's official formation, Nathaniel Langford was appointed as the park's first superintendent in 1872. He served for 5 years but was denied a salary, funding, and staff. Langford lacked the means to improve the land or properly protect the park, and without formal policy or regulations, he had few legal methods to enforce such protection. This left Yellowstone vulnerable to poachers, vandals, and others seeking to raid its resources. He addressed the practical problems park administrators faced in the 1872 report report of the Secretary of the Interior and correctly predicted that Yellowstone would become a major international attraction deserving the continuing stewardship of the government. In 1875, Colonel William Ludlow, who had previously explored areas of Montana under the command of George Armstrong Custer, was assigned to organize and lead an expedition to Montana and the newly established Yellowstone Park. Observations about the lawlessness and exploitation of park resources were included in Ludlow's report of a reconnaissance to the Yellowstone National Park. The report included letters and attachments by other expedition members, including naturalist and mineralogist George Bird Grinnell. Grinnell documented the poaching of buffalo, deer, elk, and antelope for hides. It is estimated that during the winter of 1874 to 1875, not less than 3,000 buffalo and mule deer suffer even more severely than the elk, and the antelope nearly as much. As a result, Langford was forced to step down in 1877. Having traveled through Yellowstone and witnessed land management problems firsthand, Philetus Norris volunteered for the position following Langford's exit. Congress finally saw fit to implement a salary for the position, as well as to provide a minimal funding to operate the park. Norris used these funds to expand access to the park, building numerous crude roads and facilities. In 1880, Harry Yount was appointed as a gamekeeper to control poaching and vandalism in the park. Yount had previously spent decades exploring the mountain country of present-day Wyoming, including the Grand Tetons, after joining F.V. Hayden's Geological Survey in 1873. Yount is the first National Park Ranger, and Yount's Peak, at the head of the Yellowstone River, was named in his honor. However, these measures still proved to be insufficient in protecting the park, as neither Norris nor the three superintendents who followed were given sufficient manpower or resources. The Northern Pacific Railroad built a train station in Livingston, Montana, connecting to the northern entrance in the early 1880s, which helped to increase visitation from 300 in 1872 to 5,000 in 1883. Visitors in these early years faced poor roads and limited services, and most access into the park was on horse or via stagecoach. By 1908, visitation increased enough to attract a Union Pacific Railroad connection to West Yellowstone. Though rail visitation fell off considerably by World War II and ceased around the 1960s, much of the railroad line was converted to nature trails, among them the Yellowstone Branch Line Trail. During the 1870s and 1880s, Native American tribes were effectively excluded from the national park. Under a half-dozen tribes had made seasonal use of the Yellowstone area, but the only year-round residents were small bands of eastern Shoshone known as sheep eaters. They left the area under the assurances of a treaty negotiated in 1868, under which the sheep eaters ceded the lands but retained the right to hunt in Yellowstone. The United States never ratified the treaty and refused to recognize the claims of the sheep eaters or any other tribe that had used Yellowstone. The Nez Perce band associated with Chief Joseph, numbering about 750 people, passed through Yellowstone National Park in 13 days during late August 1877. They were being pursued by the U.S. Army and entered the national park about 2 weeks after the Battle of the Big Hole. Some of the Nez Perce were friendly to the tourists and other people they encountered in the park. Some were not. 9 park visitors were briefly taken captive, despite Joseph and other chiefs ordering that no one should be harmed. At least 2 people were killed and several wounded. One of the areas where encounters occurred was in Lower Giza Basin and east along a branch of the Firehole River to Mary Mountain and beyond. The stream is still known as Nez Perce Creek. A group of Bannocks entered the park in 1878, alarming park superintendent Philetus Norris. In the aftermath of the Sheep-Eater Indian War of 1879, Norris built a fort to prevent Native Americans from entering the national park. Ongoing poaching and destruction of natural resources continued unabated until the U.S. Army arrived at Mammoth Hot Springs in 1886 and built Camp Sheridan. Over the next 22 years the Army constructed permanent structures, and Camp Sheridan was renamed Fort Yellowstone. On May 7, 1894, the Boone and Crockett Club, acting through the personality of George G. Vest, Arnold Haig, William Hallett Phillips, W.A. Wadsworth, Archibald Rogers, Theodore Roosevelt, and George Bird Grinnell, were successful in carrying through the Park Protection Act, which saved the park. The Lacey Act of 1900 provided legal support for the officials prosecuting poachers, with the funding and manpower necessary to keep a diligent watch. The Army developed their own policies and regulations that permitted public access while protecting park wildlife and natural resources. When the National Park Service was created in 1916, many of the management principles developed by the Army were adopted by the new agency. The Army turned control over to the National Park Service on October 31, 1918. Later history: by 1915, 1,000 automobiles per year were entering the park, resulting in conflicts with horses and horse-drawn transportation. Horse travel on roads was eventually prohibited. The Civilian Conservation Corps, a New Deal relief agency for young men, played a major role between 1933 and 1942 in developing Yellowstone facilities. CCC projects included reforestation, campground development of many of the park's trails and campgrounds, trail construction, fire hazard reduction, and firefighting work. The CCC built the majority of the early visitor centers, campgrounds, and the current system of park roads. During World War II, tourist travel fell sharply, staffing was cut, and many facilities fell into disrepair. By the 1950s, visitation increased tremendously in Yellowstone and other national parks. To accommodate the increased visitation, park officials implemented Mission 66, an effort to modernize and expand park service facilities, planned to be completed by 1966, in honor of the 50th anniversary of the founding of the National Park Service. Mission 66 construction diverged from the traditional log cabin style with design features of a modern style. During the late 1980s, most construction styles in Yellowstone reverted to the more traditional designs. After the enormous forest fires of 1988 damaged much of Grant Village, structures that were rebuilt in the traditional style. The visitor center at Canyon Village, which opened in 2006, incorporates a more traditional design as well. The 1959 Hebgen Lake earthquake just west of Yellowstone at Hebgen Lake damaged roads and some structures in the park. In the northwest section of the park, new geysers were found, and many existing hot springs became turbid. It was the most powerful earthquake to hit the region in recorded history. In 1963, after several years of public controversy regarding the forced reduction of the elk population in Yellowstone, United States Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall appointed an advisory board to collect scientific data to inform future wildlife management of the national parks. In a paper known as the Leopold Report, the committee observed that culling programs at other national parks had been ineffective, and recommended management of Yellowstone's elk population. The wildfires during the summer of 1988 were the largest in the history of the park. approximately 793,880 acres or 36% of the parkland was impacted by the fires, leading to a systematic re-evaluation of fire management policies. The fire season of 1988 was considered normal until a combination of drought and heat by mid-July contributed to an extreme fire danger. On Black Saturday, August 20, 1988, strong winds expanded the fires rapidly, and more than 150,000 acres burned. The expansive cultural history of the park has been documented by the 1,000 archaeological sites that have been discovered. The park has 1,106 historic structures and features, and of these Obsidian Cliff and 5 buildings have been designated National Historic Landmarks. Yellowstone was designated an International Biosphere Reserve on October 26, 1976, and a UN World Heritage Site on September 8, 1978. The park was placed on the list of World Heritage in Danger from 1995 to 2003 due to the effects of tourism, infection of wildlife, and issues with invasive species. In 2010, Yellowstone National Park was honored with its own quarter under the America the Beautiful Quarters program. Justin Farrell explores 3 moral sensibilities that motivated activists in dealing with Yellowstone. First came the utilitarian vision of maximum exploitation of natural resources, characteristic of developers in the late 19th century. Second was the spiritual vision of nature inspired by the Romanticism and the Transcendentalists the mid-19th century. The 20th century saw the biocentric moral vision that focuses on the health of the ecosystem as theorized by Aldo Leopold, which lends to the expansion of federally protected areas into the surrounding ecosystems. Heritage and Research Center. The Heritage and Research Center is located at Gardner, Montana, near the north entrance to the park. The center is home to the Yellowstone National Park's museum collection, archives, research library, historian archaeology lab, and herbarium. The Yellowstone National Park archives maintain collections of historical records of Yellowstone and the National Park Service. The collection includes the administrative records of Yellowstone, as well as resource management records, records from major projects, and donated manuscripts and personal papers. The archives are affiliated with the National Archives and Records Administration. Geography. Approximately 96% of the land area of Yellowstone National Park is located within the state of Wyoming. Another 3% is within Montana, with the remaining 1% in Idaho. The park is 63 miles north to south and 54 miles west to east by air. Yellowstone is 2,219,789 acres in area, larger than the states of Rhode Island and Delaware. Rivers and lakes cover 5% of the land area, with the largest water body being Yellowstone Lake at 87,040 acres. Yellowstone Lake is up to 400 feet deep and has 110 miles of shoreline. At an elevation of 7,733 feet above sea level, Yellowstone Lake is the largest high-altitude lake in North America. Forests comprise 80% of the land area of the park. Most of the rest is grassland. The Continental Divide of North America runs diagonally through the southwestern part of the park. The divide is a topographic feature that separates Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean water drainages. About one-third of the park lies on the west side of the divide. The origins of the Yellowstone and Snake Rivers are near each other but on opposite sides of the divide. As a result, the waters of the Snake River flow to the Pacific Ocean, while those flows of the Yellowstone find the way to the Atlantic Ocean via the Gulf of Mexico. The park sits on the Yellowstone Plateau, at an average elevation of 8,000 feet above sea level. The plateau is bounded on nearly all sides by mountain ranges of the Middle Rocky Mountains, which range from 9,000 to 11,000 feet in elevation. The highest point in the park is atop Eagle Peak and the lowest is along Reese Creek. Nearby mountain ranges include the Gallatin Range to the northwest, the Beartooth Mountains in the north, the Absaroka Range to the east, and the Teton Range and the Madison Range to the southwest and west. The most prominent summit on the Yellowstone Plateau is Mount Washburn at 10,243 feet. Yellowstone National Park has one of the world's largest petrified forests. Trees which were long ago buried by ash and soil and transformed from wood to mineral materials. This ash and other volcanic debris are believed to have come from the park area itself. This is largely because Yellowstone is actually a massive caldera of a supervolcano. There are 290 waterfalls of at least 15 feet in the park, the highest being the lower falls of the Yellowstone River at 308 feet. 3 deep canyons are located in the park, cut through the volcanic tuff of the Yellowstone Plateau by rivers over the last 640,000 years. The Lewis River flows through Lewis Canyon in the south, and the Yellowstone River has carved 2 colorful canyons, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone and the Black Canyon of the Yellowstone in its journey north.